All right, so 6 o'clock, I'm going to call the meeting to order. All board members are present. We are going to start the May 13th public hearing minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the May 13th, 2025 public hearing minutes.
Second.
Mark was excused from that meeting.
What's that?
Mark was excused from that meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you could make a motion or not.
I'll make
Yeah,
a motion
take-
to approve.
Yeah, I think.
Came in late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Good.
I totally missed. I'm looking at the thing saying.
I'm like, Mark was at the meeting, but this is the.
Yeah, I went to Canterbury.
Yeah. Just wanted a tour.
So you got a motion and a second? All right, all those in favor say aye.
I
Opposed?
Abstain.
Motion passes. We have a second set of public hearing minutes.
Second motion. Take a motion to accept the public meeting minutes.
We're doing another meeting or meeting minutes or another hearing?
This is
Public hearing.
I understand.
All right, further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
I
Opposed? And one abstention.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, I'm
and,
not sure where I came in, so I'm just gonna hang on both of them.
You're
And then-
good on the second. You're good on the minutes of the meeting, which does keep. We'll do it here for the meeting.
yes, now we're doing the meeting. May 13th, public meeting.
make a motion to approve the May 13th, 2025 public meeting minutes.
Second.
Any edits? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
I
Opposed? That's accepted. Our next meeting is June 10th at Canterbury Elementary School.
Yeah, just pop up.
Right.
Public communication and correspondence. All right, we will move on to continuing business then. And you wanna turn to that? This is where Nick.
Nick was our facilitator for our strategic planning process. He's going to join us today, talk us through that process, and the board has a slide deck in the folder.
Yeah, so it's separate of the minutes. Yeah. Right.
Hey, Nick, can you hear me? Hey, Nick, can you say something now? Oh, there you are. You're just very quiet. I don't understand why it's so quiet. I think that's what the overall problem is that it was so quiet on the speaker and the Chromebook. How's that?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
That's not bad.
And then, Brandon, are you seeing anyone in the waiting room when you're at it? Like,
Yes. Yep. Go ahead and let her.
thanks, sir.
Full screen. So I'm going to spin it around. So you can see the table.
That's good.
How's that for you?
Good me. Everybody.
Hi, Nick.
So it's making a jump right into the plan.
So welcome, Nick. Sitting here with a full board and going to take some time to go over basically the strategic planning process. They have access to your slide deck as well as the scorecard. So I'm just going to hand it right on over to you and walk us through it.
Sounds good. Well, great. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you. Excited to be at this point in the year as we spent the better part of the school year working through the redevelopment of the strategic plan. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background tonight, sort of some introductions as to who we are, talk through some of the decisions that were made, and then set you up for some next steps and let you know where we're heading from here, and then we'll save a little time for questions at the end. But I wanted to start with a quick introduction. My name is Nick Cohn. I'm the Vice President of K-12 Education Strategy for Qualtrics. I'm based in southeast Wisconsin. I'm just outside the Milwaukee area. And I've been doing this work for a few years now, but spent 20 years in K-12 education. I was a teacher, a principal, director of teaching and learning, assistant superintendent. I've overseen everything from HR operations to the strategic plan academic side of the work. Also spent the last 4 years as an education consultant. I've personally supported now over 300 school districts and state departments of ed across the U.S. In a variety of ways, many of which tie directly to the development or implementation of their strategic plan. I'm joined by my colleague tonight, Caitlin, and so I'll turn it over to her for a quick introduction.
Hello, everybody. My name is Caitlin Lowry, and I work with IBIS Public Sector, so we're an implementation partner with Qualtrics. And I come from the world of education as well. I'm based out of Manor, Texas, where I have 15 years of K-12 educational experience. I have my doctorate in curriculum and instruction. I've worked at both campus and district level. I'm currently a school board trustee myself, and as well as being a board member for foundations in addition to that. So my focus is to be able to support school districts in utilizing Qualtrics to be able to achieve your goals and bring success to your students in your district. Wonderful to be here today.
So just to set the stage a little bit, as of up to a couple of weeks ago, I actually worked for IBIS Public Sector. As Caitlin said, IBIS was an implementation partner of Qualtrics. So the way to think about that is Qualtrics is a software program, cloud-based, that we use for the capture of stakeholder feedback and visualization of data sets and analysis. IBIS Public Sector is the implementer or advisory firm that was supporting that and the company that was hired to support the strategic planning work. I went from IBIS to Qualtrics a couple of weeks ago, and so given the close relationship between the two, I still have the opportunity to work with you all. I had the pleasure over the course of this year of working with a much broader team at Shaker as we worked to develop and again sort of revitalize the strategic plan. You can see the team here. It was really a very diverse team of stakeholders, which is great and exactly what we want when we're doing work like this. It was made up of district and school leaders, educators, we had board members, we had some community members, parents, and we also had students. And I just want to sort of call out and highlight the feedback and the participation of the students who were involved on the committee. They were phenomenal and provided really good feedback throughout the process, and I really thought were a highlight of a lot of the work we were doing as they provided a really healthy and positive perspective on the types of things that we should be prioritizing where we're heading. So the entire team did a phenomenal job. We met over several Saturdays from between December and April, and also there was a little bit of work that was done in between, as we sort of prepped for and debriefed on some of the work that occurred on the sessions. Again, grateful to the entire team who gave up their Saturdays to come in and do that work. Also, I just want to sort of point to the fact that this team gathered on what amounted to be 2 holiday weekends, one over Valentine's Day and then the other one over Easter. And so just the sort of, again, willingness to come together and spend that time, I was really appreciative of. I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about strategic plans and tips to set the stage for the strategic plan. So oftentimes in education, when we think about strategic planning work, we have some preconceived ideas of what that work is and what it needs to look like. And when I was working with the team, I thought it was important that we set the stage around sort of 3 facts, myths about strategic planning, and I wanted to sort of set the conversation here around that as well. The first one is that strategic plans are lengthy and all-encompassing, and I know your prior strategic plan was well developed, but it also was very lengthy. And so one of the things we talked about is when we think about strategic planning work, well, less is more, right? We want the strategic plan to be informative. We want it to help direct the work, but it needs to be easily digestible by our community and our internal stakeholders so that we can easily look at it and say, oh, I see the priorities here are very clear. I know how we're measuring them. I know where we're going, right? And it allows everyone to operate within a space where they can do the work more effectively. Ultimately, what we had said was we want a strategic plan that's about 1 to 3 pages in length and highlights all of the priorities and main components of a plan that are most important that I'll go through in a little bit. So what you'll see is we've taken the prior sort of lengthier strategic plan that you had and through the revisions of the team, we were able to boil it down to a more concise scorecard, again, that highlights sort of the key pieces of that plan's work. The second myth I wanted to highlight was that strategic plans are reviewed and revised every 3 to 5 years. You're going to notice this plan has been built through 2028, so the next 3 years. That said, we're in a cycle of continuous improvement, and within that space, we want strategic plans to be continually reviewed and revised on an annual, if not more frequent basis. And we make small adjustments to that plan over time. We don't completely rewrite the plan, but we want to be agile enough where if something's not working, we're able to sort of quickly get in and address it, right? And so this will set the overall roadmap, but we want to be flexible enough to make adjustments as those things come up. The third relates to core values and how important they are. In a lot of ways, the core values within a plan, strategic plan, drive the entire plan forward in a variety of ways. Within the myth category here is that core values only need to be identified and defined. You're going to note that most core values are visible, like on websites, sometimes posters, things like that. But really, we want to be using core values with very clear definitions to define the ways in which we should be acting within the organization and what misalignment to a core value looks like so that we can address it and correct it. So in this space, we want to structure our celebrations around core values, and the core values should be guiding us as to where we're heading around the strategic work. And so in the case of the work we were doing together as a committee, we looked at the mission statement as we revised and looked at the core values and set the stage for the other strategic priorities to come after. Feeding a lot of the work that we were doing was a series of stakeholder surveys, students, staff, families, and community members. Those surveys went out in the fall and were focused on a couple of different aspects. One aspect was focused in on what are the priorities that we should be focusing on, right? And so it's sort of a future focus. What should we be prioritizing? What do we need to be thinking about as we're doing this strategic planning work? The other half of the survey was a look back and an identification as to what are we doing well, where are there opportunities to improve, what's sort of the state of the district, right? And so we looked at what's the district's current state, what are we prioritizing, where do we head from here? Those data were really helpful and informative in terms of thinking about where all the various stakeholder groups stood in terms of our current work as a district and where we needed to be going. And so it helped inform and drive and generate conversation for us. So our process overall, with that as the backdrop, we went through really a kind of multi-phase process, but you can sort of think of it in a couple of different chunks. On the left-hand side here, you'll see the phases we went through. The first phase was a current state review. We went through in teams and we looked at the prior strategic plan. We identified strengths and opportunities within that plan. We talked about the implications around that plan for our future work and made sure we dove into it and really understood it. We looked at our mission statement and our core values and had healthy conversation around the way in which we're living that mission and core values, whether we should be making revisions or whether we're happy with the current state. And then we looked at the survey data together. Now, the sort of the first session. The second and third sessions for us were more desired state planning, meaning we took the opportunity to make revisions as needed to the core values in particular. We established strategic priorities that we should be focusing on as a district within our continuous action planning in the future. And then we established what are called key performance indicators, or KPIs, our targets by which we're going to measure our progress and know that we're on track around those strategic priorities. In terms of future work, the next steps post this we'll talk about in a little bit of detail in a little while, but really the action planning comes next. So if you think of this now as the roadmap for where we're going around our strategic work, the next step will be for the district and schools in particular to operationalize that and say, what does this mean for us? Where do we go from here? There were 2 primary product outcomes that Caitlin will be sharing with you a little bit tonight, and it sounds like you have access to one of them already. The strategic plan scorecard, which encapsulates all of the work within the strategic plan that we identified, and then a public-facing dashboard that will eventually go live, that will be transparent about the work and also be used to monitor our progress around the scorecard and the strategic plan. So a couple of things in terms of the work and where we landed. First things first, I think the most important decision we made on the front end was we kept the mission statement the same. Lots of conversation about what does it mean, how well do we know the mission, how ingrained is it in the organization, and overall there was a lot of feeling within the org that it was the one aspect of the strategic plan that we felt like everybody knew really well, and it's something that sort of served as the North Star for where we're heading in terms of our identity, and so we elected to keep that the same. We did, however, make some adjustments to the core values. You heard me mention earlier how important the core values are to the work we're going to be doing. We had more core values than this. There were a number of them under the prior strategic plan, and we agreed that if we're really going to live our core values, and we're going to see them come alive in our schools every day, particularly with our employees, we need to maybe be a little bit more concise and direct in terms of what those core values are. And so you see the core values here, along with the definitions that we provided. So integrity, excellence, growth mindset, well-being, and citizenship. Some of them came from the prior core values. Some of them were a combination of some of the prior core values. And so there were some adjustments, some consolidation that was done. And then again, you see the description on the right. Ideally, the core values moving forward are going to be utilized as a way for us to talk about our work and how we should be working as employees and the types of values we're instilling in our work daily. When we're hiring, we should be hiring people that embody our core values, and within our work and celebrations, we should be celebrating the efforts of those who are living our core values daily. So again, an important part of the plan that was solidified. From there, we had to come up with our strategic priority areas. Typically, this is going to fall between 3 and 5 areas that we're going to prioritize more holistically as the sort of roadmap for the strategic work we're going to be doing. And so they have to align back to our mission and core values. They have to be very clear, and we want to have definitions to them. The team very wisely selected a cadence here across these strategic priorities that allowed similar language to pull through. And so you're going to see here that those 3 are learning opportunities, learning environment, and learning resources as being the 3 areas that we're going to focus on. And you can see again here some descriptive statements that were provided underneath that just to give a little more definition to those strategic priority areas. Again, the word learning stands out here as being the through line across all of this, right? And then within it, again, opportunities, environment, resources, those are the 3 pillars that are going to make this up. Within each of those areas, then, we always put together what's called a theory of action. We want to sort of check our thinking around how we're going to get to that outcome around that strategic priority. And so the way we get to a theory of action is we take that strategic priority statement. We identified some desired outcomes for each of those 3 lanes, and then we combine those together into a singular statement for each one that tells us essentially we believe that by doing this, we're going to achieve that, right? And it's a nice check for us to make sure that there's alignment between what we're trying to impact and how we're trying to impact it. I won't read these to you. You can see them both within the scorecard and here, but within each of the 3 strategic priorities, we have those theory of action statements that outline, again, the beliefs that we have here. From a learning opportunity standpoint, it's really about the quality and diversity of instruction that we're providing. And note that there's some key words here around growth and achievement, which are certainly, they go hand in hand, but they're not mutually exclusive, right? We need to sort of pull those together, and they're both vital to the work we're going to be doing. The other word or phrase here to note is that we reference both academic and co-curricular activities as being central part of the work. For learning environment, it really was about building positive relationships in a service-oriented way and making sure everyone felt welcome, safe, and supported. Notice that it says all stakeholders here, so we're talking about students, staff, families, community, everyone that's coming into our buildings. We want to make sure that we're providing a supportive and safe environment for them. The third and final around learning resources. had to do with the way in which we're allocating resources, that we want to make sure that we're seeing return on investment for the community in terms of the value in dollars that they're providing, and making sure that we're providing a solid presence in the community, and that it's seen as a positive investment for the community in the work we're doing. So this is where we're going to get into some of the fiscal side of the work, but also just overall, just access to facilities, or the operational piece that all sort of lives in this learning resources side. So after the team had an opportunity to solidify those 3 strategic priorities, we had to get on to the task of deciding how we're going to measure our progress. So as we take action around these lanes, we needed to know, how are we going to know we're on track? How do we know we're living out and achieving that area of action? You can see here the various measures that were identified by the team in terms of how are we going to know we're on track from a learning opportunity standpoint. I think this will look very familiar to you. You're going to see things like reading and math achievement. You're going to see graduation rate. You're going to see post-high school plan articulation. And then you're going to notice student perception, in particular around the authenticity of their classes and access to the classes that they want. That priority came straight out of the surveying that we had done prior, where that was identified as a potential gap or opportunity for us to improve around students seeing their classrooms as being authentic and valuable beyond the classroom environment, and also across the board, parents and students and staff saying, we want to make sure everyone can get access to the classes that they want. So that lives all in priority 1. And the second priority around learning environment is all perception-based. Student perception, family perception, staff perception, particularly around the areas of safe and welcoming environment. And then on the learning resource side, staff are a resource for us, right? And so staff retention becomes an important measure for us there to make sure that we're providing high-quality staff in the classrooms. Budget and communication surveys, so thinking about the extent to which we're effectively communicating budget priorities to the community and helping them understand the budget process, and then increasing or monitoring the percent of yes votes to the annual budget as that comes before the board. And so these were the measures that we had identified as being most critical. I won't show you all of these, but I did want to speak to the fact the team then took each of those individual measures and set a metric range for each of them, by which we could establish a baseline score and monitor and track our progress moving forward. Note the descriptors we're using on the scorecard rank across a 5-point scale from does not meet expectations to significantly exceeding expectations. The way to think about this is a 3 is often where we're sort of sitting right now, right? It's sort of the minimum viable benchmark for us to say we're being successful. And you can think of a 5 as an eye to the future as to where could we be at the end of 3 years? Where do we want to be? How could we potentially get to that point? And so these metrics were established based on that, and they're likely to adjust slightly as we learn more, particularly as we administer new baseline surveys and gather new information. These will start to shift a little bit, but this is the way in which we will get to an annual score on the scorecard to know how we're doing compared to prior years. But then I'm going to pause a second and turn over to my colleague Caitlin to talk a little bit about the scorecard and the dashboard, and then we'll pause and take questions that you all have. So Caitlin, I'm going to stop sharing and let you take over.
Yes, so being able to put all of this into a place that allows you to see the progress and be able to monitor that progress is incredibly important. We want it to be done in a way that is going to be able to communicate to all of our stakeholders, both internally and externally. The scorecard itself is a way for us to be able to view both what our focus is, remind us of our core values, and really be able to provide everything in a succinct manner, while also providing us with a place to be able to track our progress. And it's incredibly important when we see continuous improvement that we are continually referring back to the data, looking to see how we have progressed and where we can find areas to enhance our efforts and other areas where we can celebrate the work that we've done. So the scorecard is designed to include the strategic priorities and the core values at the very top of it. We always want to make sure that everything we do aligns back with these things. It also allows us to clearly see how we're measuring our progress for each of those 3 strategic priorities. So it lists out the different things that we're going to be measuring to be able to determine our level of success and the progress that we're making moving forward. Below that, we have our theory of action for each of those strategic priorities. So it's always there, ready and available for us to reference and review anytime we're taking a look at what kinds of metrics we have to adhere to and to review our progress moving forward. The second page is for us to be able to track those key performance indicators. So this allows us to be able to easily see side by side where we are beginning and what progress we're making over time. The ratings are listed at the bottom for you to be able to review as you do your work. But this allows us to all be able to track this independently and together as a team to really come together and make that effort with full knowledge of where we are at measurement-wise to be able to make those long-lasting and important decisions moving forward as a district. Additionally, we have our dashboard, which is designed to be able to be an external-facing way of communicating how we are doing. So the same way that we want to track our progress internally as a district, we also want to be able to show transparently and in a way that allows all stakeholders to feel empowered to speak to the data, to be informed by the data, to feel like they know what's going on in our district. This dashboard allows us to do just that. We have created an introduction page that is not yet live, but the purpose of this page is to be able to sort of mimic the scorecard in a way that makes it easy for all stakeholders to be able to review. So we have the mission statement on the left, as well as the core values on the right.
Sorry, Caitlin,
Yeah.
you're showing this one first.
Okay, so let's try that again. Sorry about that, y'all. So here we have our mission statement, as well as our core values. And as we scroll down, we're easily able to see our strategic priorities along with a description that explains the purpose and the value of them. And then below that, our theories of action for each of our strategic priorities. And then even further down, we have our key performance indicators. This is a way that we have devised for you to be able to update the dashboard very easily in a way that is accessible and understandable to all community members. So for those key ratings that we noted on the scorecard, we have them listed here according to the language around it, as well as the number and also the color coding. So as we scroll down through each of our strategic priorities, you can see the list of priority measures. And for each priority measure, you can see the baseline score. And with each year after that, you will be able to update that score, which will automatically update the dashboard as well. So this is a very, very efficient and professional way to be able to share out that progress that you are making with all of your stakeholders so they not only feel informed, but also involved in the process. You can see this for all three of the strategic priorities. Just to note, all of the baseline scores that you see at this point is all just sample data that was put in to be able to show you how it works. The baselines will be determined by the leadership team, but once they do, we'll be able to update with all of the updated data as we move along. Additionally, this dashboard contains other pages around the results of the student, staff, and family and community surveys, which allow you to be able to share out that information with your stakeholders as well. So this provides you with an introduction page that gives you that one-page summary of what we are looking at as far as our strategic plan and the progress that we're making, as well as giving them the capability to be able to dive deeper into results of the surveys as they want to review more. And the more that we have our stakeholders involved in the process, the more empowered they are to be an educational partner and not just a stakeholder in its own. So that is what we have provided.
So one last piece, just by way of sort of summary statement. Caitlin will just walk through. There's just a couple of next steps in terms of finishing things from here, and then we'd love to open things up to questions. So Caitlin, do you want to talk about the final steps?
Yes, so as we move forward, we want to make sure and determine our baseline scores. That's going to allow us to update that dashboard so that when it goes live, we can publish it with accurate data so that from day one, everybody knows where we stand and where we want to go from there. Once we determine those baseline scores, we will update the survey and be able to publish that updated data on the dashboard that can then be used as a public-facing dashboard so that you can share that on your website, share it with stakeholders via various communications. Additionally, we want to then build out the data collection tools that we're going to use for each of these key metrics. We want to make sure that we have a very clear and effective way of collecting data by which we can then measure our progress and really build out a strong action plan for how we're going to achieve our strategic plan as a district.
The primary way that's going to show up, by the way, is the stakeholder surveys. So you'll notice that there were a number of key performance indicators that were focused on perception. We need to build the instruments we're going to use to gather that perception, and so that will be a piece of the ongoing work. And then we'll end with the site-based action planning, and again, it'll be up to the district and the schools to operationalize the work and start to drive things forward in terms of the strategic plan. Before we open it up, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure. You have an amazing district with a great team, everybody incredibly dedicated, thoughtful conversation, and really good work throughout. And so I just want to applaud the team that we had. It was a great group of professionals, and we were really grateful and appreciative. So with that, I'd love to turn it back over to Michael and or open it up for questions that you all may have.
There must be some questions.
Is there any way to get the data from the surveys on the front end by community members and then parents and then students to see how that pushed or drove coming up with the priority areas?
Yeah, so obviously we feel like that's an important part of the story. Those data were shared with the team that was involved in the work, and the dashboard is available. It's just turned off right now until the full strategic plan was built. Michael, I'd certainly allow you to address anything there if you wanted in terms of how you might pull those data out.
Yeah, so there's going to be some overall communication that I send out at some point once we continue this work. That will have a link to those surveys. So to be able to get all the different stakeholder groups and the results of those survey questions, you'll be able to see all the data.
So unless someone jumps in, I'll keep going with my questions. So the core values, I'm assuming that this is for both students and faculty, or is it just for students? A couple times I wasn't sure if that included both.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So the group that they're primarily for, so core values affect everyone, but the group they're primarily for employees. So as we think about core values within the organization, right, we're aligning our employees and our hiring and the work we're doing to the core values of the district. Now, obviously, we want our students embodying and living those core values. Obviously, we want our family members who are engaging with the schools to live and embody those core values as well. But the group that we have the primary responsibility to in terms of living out the core values is our staff. Because we're setting the work environment and we're identifying the ways in which people go about their daily work, and we want them modeling and displaying and living those core values every day, with students and family members being the ones who then engage and participate in that.
Gotcha. Was there any conversation when you identified the strategic priority areas? So you have the learning opportunities, the learning environment, and the resources. Was there any discussion about what learning outcomes might be?
Yeah. So we talked about the learning outcomes as being the byproduct of all of the work we're doing within those strategic lanes, right? So if we're doing really good work around providing opportunities, right, and sort of that safe, welcoming environment, and resources that we need, then students should be achieving and growing, right, and hitting outcomes. And so the measures we're using really are the learning outcomes to tell us whether or not we're on track with those other areas. So if we're doing really good work there, it should be translating into outcomes for students.
Okay. And then where to go? In your key performance indicators. I personally, I struggle with a performance indicator being perception based, because it's been my experience with parents who don't necessarily value an education, or a student that doesn't necessarily value an education. Their perception is everything's bad. And sometimes perception isn't necessarily valid. Especially when it comes to education. But I'm kind of curious. You listed the state and local assessments. Why not include national as well?
I can certainly let anyone around the table respond. I think the thought process was, I'm not sure how many independent national assessments the district provides. Again, I know many of them are state and local, right? We provide our state assessment. We provide local assessments to measure student progress. I know there are things like SAT and other sort of national assessments. I think the team was focused on the most prevalent assessments that the highest volume of students take. But Michael, or anyone around the table, I'd certainly welcome you to speak to that.
No, that's correct. We were just talking about the tools that we most frequently use.
Are you talking about NEEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress?
Well, any national assessment. I mean, for the most part, right now, I think the most common one would be SATs. But if we add the national piece to it, we could be performing great as far as New England is concerned. But if you pushed it out to see, how the performance, indicators are showing on a national level, we may not be, performing great. And I think that would be a fairly significant data point.
The one thing I would point to there is we don't ignore certainly the other data points that are not included here as a key performance indicator, right? In theory, if our state and local assessments are high, right, we should be okay on national assessments. We can certainly look to the national assessment or SAT data on an annual basis and say, hey, look, there's a disconnect here. Like, we're performing really well on reading at the state level, but we're not really performing there on the SAT. Then I think that's a conversation we have throughout the process, right, as of the plan. And if we make an adjustment there, we make an adjustment. So I think I see this very much as the starting point to drive the conversation. And if something's misaligning, we can have that conversation down the road and make an adjustment. In terms of the perception piece that you raised, and I totally recognize why that's a concern, I think that we believe that was a really valid instrument, right? So if you have a well-designed survey, that you can gather valid data, right, from people who are choosing to respond. That said, we were very careful in identifying what the indicators we were focused on were. So you think about like safe and welcoming environment, for instance. Like, we want to know on an ongoing basis, your students and staff feel safe, your families feel safe when they come in the door, do people feel welcome. We felt like that was perhaps a more valid indicator, right, than maybe other places we could go with like perception of budget or something like that, right? And so we tried to stick to areas that we felt were very concrete and actionable. I always talk about the fact that we don't send out or ask survey questions we're not prepared to act on. And so we wanted to make sure that the indicators were actionable and something we felt like we could control. Also, students feeling like their learning is authentic. We talked a lot about like how do you interpret scores there, what does that look like, and the idea of like, all right, are students saying that they're finding relevance in their learning or not? And I thought the students on the committee had some really interesting insights into like, yeah, this is how we do relevance, this is how we don't, this is what students say to me, this is what I hear. Again, we felt like it was a good measure to sort of baseline from and sort of drive some perspective moving forward. So rather than go to like holistic surveys, we try to really hone in on what elements of perception we feel like are going to give us the best data to act on.
Okay, and then the last question I had was showing the graduation rate as a key performance indicator. I mean, here in New Hampshire, we have compulsory attendance to the age of 18. So in my opinion, that kind of you're going to have a high graduation rate, no matter what, because of that compulsory attendance. What might be a really good performance indicator is what the students choose to be their post-secondary school. how many have completed that plan. Doesn't necessarily have to be the exact one. They may make changes, along the way. But if they're going to choose to enroll in a 4-year post-secondary, program, how many have completed it? Now, the logistics to getting that, that data is going to be difficult. This has been a similar conversation on every strategic, plan, that I've been, involved with. It would be great, great information. I just don't know how it would be obtained, but I really think that would be an excellent performance indicator.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? You articulated it. How do we get those data? Because they're not readily available, right? And so what our experience has been is it takes a few years to get there. The way you do it is you start to do graduate exit surveys and you build an alumni database off of that. And then you have to figure out ways to be able to sort of annually reach your graduates for updated contact information, have them be willing to provide perception data back, right? And so it can be done, but it is very, as you pointed out, it's challenging, right? Once we lose track, to try to be able to sort of round up that information. So
right. I would
know
figure with personal devices now and people not changing phone numbers no matter where they go, state to state, I think obtaining that data is becoming easier and easier.
Yeah, and that's something where Qualtrics can help you. Qualtrics has the ability to send text message-based surveys to people, and so it's something that certainly we can continue to explore as we think about the ways in which we collect data moving forward. Again, I would point to that as, if we get into, end of year 1, year 2 of the strategic plan and graduation rate has been pretty static, we can say, maybe need to shift that metric over here and start looking at other ways that we're gathering completion data. Again, it's a living document, so those are things that we keep doing.
So I participated, so I should know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask because I'm already disconnected a little bit. We conducted a survey to help drive us to some of these decisions, but I guess my question is, do we use the same questions moving forward on that survey, or we adjust them, or maybe we feel like we're not getting this data, so the next year we're doing a couple different questions? I want to have a survey that's consistent, but I realize you have to be flexible too.
The intention was not to repeat those surveys as written. So those surveys had a very particular purpose, which was to gather the data needed for strategic planning. Now, the surveys moving forward are going to be aligned to the strategic plan that was developed and measure the areas we need to measure in a very direct way, and that those should be consistent year over year within the strategic plan. So the goal will be, now that we've sort of done what we needed to do there, we will revise the surveys, we'll re-administer those, and then we'll use those as aligned with the strat plan moving forward in a more consistent way. But they will not be identical to the surveys that were administered for the purpose of strategic planning.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess my only concern is feels like creating those surveys is going to be a lot of work to get the data that we're looking for to answer the questions.
Yeah, and that's where Ibis and Caitlin come in to help craft those survey questions. If you continue to work with her moving forward around designing the survey, Ibis has valid and reliable question sets that they've utilized across multiple districts across the U.S. You can also craft custom questions. Her and her team will be the guide for you then in that work to make sure that you're asking really good questions on those surveys.
Other questions? All right. Thank you very much. It's been very helpful.
Thank you,
Right.
Nick. Thank you,
Thank you so
Caitlin.
much, team. Good luck
Thank
with the rest
you.
of the school year and keep up the great work you all are doing.
Thanks.
Michael, are there still more steps to go?
Establish the baseline for the scorecard.
Yeah.
And then when the dashboard is all set, communication will go out so that people have access to everything.
So are we not working with Nick at all anymore?
He's on the Qualtrics side, which is, they're really the
Yeah.
company that puts all the data together and keeps that dashboard alive. So he's part of Qualtrics, and Ibis is the vendor, if you will, that will continue working with us to develop survey questions and moving forward.
So
So those two really partner, Qualtrics and IBIS.
Right, but Nick has the history with us.
It does have a history with us. He's still involved because he's on the Qualtrics side of it.
I don't know how to ask, but just asking. But the assistance with the questions, survey questions, that you're saying. This is part of what we paid for, or is this
So
additional?
We put in monies for in next year's operating budget to continue contracting with Qualtrics and IBIS.
Other questions?
So like, what are the next steps for us or for like us as a board, for the district as a whole? I know you said put together the questions, but is that really what the next step is?
For the board, it's looking at basically those three priority areas and focusing board action or conversations within those three priority areas. It gives the board the direction as well as the rest of our staff in the district.
But wouldn't we look at targets too for the district as a whole once we have baseline?
That's where we establish those key performance indicators and those ranges. We've established those with the planning committee. And
Right.
then as we monitor them, the board is made aware of our progress from year to year.
Right.
Except those metrics of the planning committee.
And I was involved as well,
Yeah.
and so I'm,
What is the timeline we're looking at to get baseline?
I'd like to be able to have it before the end of the school year to be able to send out communication, but Caitlin is new, so I need to touch base with her because that's who I'll be working with directly.
Yeah, I just don't want to lose my.
I guess my question, I understand maybe we don't have it on here. So when we're setting rates for graduation or math and reading, whether it be at the SAT level, which has math and reading as well, like where's that baseline data?
That's what we have to establish so that the baseline is yet to be determined.
Right.
And that's where he said working with the district leadership team to establish those baselines.
Right, so what I'm saying is wouldn't we as the school board be involved with setting targets? Is what I'm asking for the overall district.
For goals, so it would be part of board goals, is that what you're asking? For
No,
the district?
I'm talking about for reading proficiency or for graduation rate. Are you saying it would only happen at the building level?
The key performance indicator is for the district.
Right,
Okay, so it would be grade level across the district, fourth grade, both BES and CES. So those baselines are for the district.
right. So then progress, how are we measuring progress?
With the metrics that we established, the percentages and the ratings.
But you're only going to measure year to
That's
year.
where I asked a question of having the learner outcomes as one of the priorities, because without learner outcomes being a priority, then it's not measurable.
What I was trying to say is if you look at the scorecard, right? So you go to the scorecard, the second page. Is the scorecard just reporting? We're just reporting, so graduation rate, whatever baseline is. And then 25, 26 is whatever the true numbers are. We're not, am I not saying, I'm clearly not.
So if you go to
Keep talking.
Because
the slide deck, right?
so if I have the slide deck, I see on slide 19, which is student perception. I mean, this is probably the easiest metric. I didn't say to measure, I'm saying to understand, right? So we know if students report, a level 5 would be if we have 90% and above. What I'm saying is if the math, where's math in here? Because are we using these same metrics, I guess is my point.
We have separate metrics. Those ranges vary depending on that key performance indicator.
Okay.
So as a planning committee, we set those ranges.
For every.
At our last meeting.
I know, I had to leave early, I had to leave at
Oh, I'm
lunch.
sorry.
So in the hour and a half, you that's great that you
I
did
can't
that.
remember yesterday.
In that hour and
We
a half
broke
I
that into
missed,
groups,
you broke down,
metrics for everyone.
But I guess I'm still confused as to how are we getting to that number for, say, student perception, authenticity. How are we getting to that?
I don't know yet.
Okay,
I don't know yet. That's why
That's
the
the
work
next
has to
step
continue
with-
with Caitlin and how to establish baseline because we didn't discuss that as a committee.
okay, I feel better because I don't remember having that conversation about how we're getting to baseline.
So I've already posed that question. I have to have another meeting with Caitlin to get a description as to how we're going to get to that baseline.
And then I guess a follow-up, and I don't know if this is where Michelle's going or not, but say we have this data. Are we just gonna re-ask next year and see where the chips fall? Or are we going to get that baseline data and make decisions to hopefully improve those numbers?
Yes. So
Yeah.
once you have the baseline, then you're hoping to show progress.
so you're
But I don't wanna
planning
hope, I wanna have a plan.
it. You want to plan, that was slide
That's where the details come in at the building level.
22, it says begin action planning, which then means as a board, we would action plan.
Correct.
Where can we find information on the targets for, like I'm trying, if you look again, the second page of the dashboard, reading achievement, because that is one number. Right? So how are we taking,
I think that's still to be determined.
Yes.
I don't think we have an answer to that.
okay, so you didn't establish that,
We haven't established a baseline yet.
How to get to the baseline.
or how we're,
That's the major next step is establishing the baseline.
and I guess so for the, I'm gonna say this, quantitative measures, so the measures that we have for numbers, what is the board's role in looking at those things? Actually, I would say with all of it. Because I believe we have a role, so I
Yeah,
would
so-
rephrase.
It would be a matter of when those baseline numbers are established, you could bring it to the board and have you either agree to it or not. I think that could be an action item at that point for the board.
Or as important to me, how we got there.
Well, that's right.
Like, how did we get that? Oh, we're getting a 5 in reading achievement. How did we get to a 5? I want to know what the details.
And I want to know what a 5. I have no idea how we're going to take reading achievement. I guess we have to do it across all the,
Percentage of students that fall in on grade level.
right, but grades 3 through 8 and once in high school, that's huge. Okay.
Good questions.
Wish I could answer the baseline piece, but
It's okay. I just want to, I'd like us to continue to have a role. Because like Sean, I kind of want to know how we got there, if it's going to come to us.
Yeah.
All right. Are there other questions? Strategic plan. All right. We'll move on to grading and reporting follow-up with our high school representative. Are you prepared to talk to?
Yeah.
So yes, we have probably what you're looking at.
Yeah. I think so.
I just point something out really quickly. I just want to congratulate Tyler. He was just the other day officially recognized as he's going to be the valedictorian of the class.
Congrats, Tyler.
Going to UNH next year. And the other board rep, Maddie Smith, is our salutatorian of the class of 2025. So 2 high achieving students that you've had an opportunity to work with this year.
Thanks.
Woohoo, congratulations.
I have to write like a speech.
All right. Am I good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I get.
So, so let me back up a little bit. I don't think you need to read through from
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
We have all the information. I'm hoping all the board members have read it. Maybe, I mean, you can really do whatever you want. I'll leave it up to you, but maybe what I'm looking for is maybe a kind of summary or consensus of what you are seeing in response.
There was a lot of confusion that we with the students, just kind of about how some of the questions were asked. They were, I don't know, I think people kind of felt they led them to a specific answer. And also that it's not necessarily the grading system that prepares students for the future, but it's really just kind of a reflection of how we're preparing and how we're doing our preparation. But then, like, specifically about the grading system, it was kind of weird because, like, the freshmen and sophomores both all said that they had a good understanding of the grading system. And then maybe we got to juniors and seniors. They were kind of split about their understanding of the grading system. There was also a lot of comments about teacher inconsistency with grading.
So the teacher inconsistency, like I just want to touch on that very briefly because I went to school many, many, many years ago. But like, yeah, 100-point grading scale, I think. And we would have teachers that never gave above an 80. Or teachers that never gave us above a 70, but then they would scale it up. So that like, they scale it.
Curve.
Yeah, it's like on a curve, but every teacher felt like they were a little different, even back then. I don't know if it had anything to do with the grading scale as much as how they taught. And I guess part of me feels like we want to have some difference. Teachers should be able to do what they want, but I also don't want the students not to understand anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, like, having different teachers do different things is what prepares you for after high school, because you'll be more comfortable with different situations and trying to like navigate different people and how they work.
Do you think do you know or have any thoughts on why there was a difference between the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior?
I don't know if it's just like the freshman sophomores just didn't care as much and we just said yes, or I also don't know if like maybe juniors and seniors had like the switch or the changing in the grading system between last year and this year, so maybe that's where the confusion is, just because we went from, or I guess they made a couple changes and that probably confused some of them. But honestly, I was very surprised that the freshmen and sophomores all said yes. I couldn't really understand why they would say yes, but then the juniors and seniors had a lot of no's.
Tyler, how many students in each grade level?
We try to hit like 10 to 15.
10 students, 10 to 15 students in each grade level. From a variety of classes, like different age. age groups that can sound like different. I don't know level, but like
Yeah.
honor students, those who aren't in honors, those who maybe struggle more academically than others, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
So two years ago, when we started down this road, we had a student rep who articulated very well what the student body was expressing, and that based on what was just presented to us, a lot of those issues remain. And I was the last meeting when faculty or I guess department heads reported out. We all went, wow, looks like problem solved. Let's put this thing to bed. And now I'm reading through the transition from a freshman to a senior, and it doesn't look like much has been resolved, which is, I guess, why I requested this feedback from faculty and students. The same concerns at junior level, senior level remain, and some of them remain at the sophomore level. And maybe the freshmen are they don't know what they don't know yet. I'm not sure. But.
I think it's important to point out the caveat there at the beginning, though. Before going over the responses, it should be noted that the questions were asked in a specific way, which may lead students to a specific answer. The questions don't offer much room for variation or discussion in responses because they're asked in a way that leads you to one answer.
But we got drastically different answers between
Are they drastically different?
from freshmen to seniors. I think the answers are very different.
I think I don't feel the same, but
I'm gonna call on Matt first. Do you know if there are things we can be doing as a board, a district, a high school, whatever, to better help students understand what they don't seem to understand in some of these questions?
So Tyler at one point came to me when he was kind of in the midst of talking to students and expressed concerns about the questions. I think if that is a concern going into the question, and Tyler being a very informed, he's valedictorian in the class, the grading system pretty well, and he's excelled in it, and had concerns about the questions that were being asked. I think that is a very valid concern and something that he's. I don't know, there was no, as Tyler alluded to, it didn't open a discussion with students. There wasn't, okay, so what do you not understand? What are some issues there? I think Tyler's consideration that students who are in the junior year and senior year have seen the most change, particularly from last year to this year, but enrollment rates and whole new student information, learning management system, they saw the most change. A student coming from the 8th grade to freshman year, this is just what high school looks like to a freshman. So this is just high school for them. I don't know. I think also the number of times that we've gone through changes and conversations about changes and concerns about changes and not changing and things like that, it's confusing kids. It's putting a situation together that is very confusing.
My understanding was that it was confusing for parents, and and then we have these sessions at the high school, and I go to them, and we've got like one set of parents showing up, and it's like, well, it can't be that confusing if they didn't make the effort on numerous occasions to go and ask questions.
I don't know how else to get it out there. I know you've been to those sessions before. I send out an update every single week so people have timelines. At the beginning of the year, there's a welcome back that outlines all the things. The first 2 days of the school year, we met with every single grade level to talk about the grading system and to make sure everybody understood that this year big changes were coming. Again, you're also talking to a group of kids who just experienced this year a significant number and degree of changes. If we keep changing grading systems, we keep making adjustments, like we're never going to know if it's working. It has to have some time to settle in and work. And so if you're talking about concerns about teacher inconsistency, this is the first time teachers have done what we're asking them to do this year. And in the midst of reviewing and adjusting their curriculum and their instructions to match the grading, the efficiency, scale, key, and all those definitions, so they're doing it on the fly. So if there are inconsistencies, of course there's going to be inconsistencies, particularly the first year. And this entire year, a lot of our professional development time has been spent looking at proficiency scales and making adjustments so the scales that we have match the definitions on the key. Well, we didn't come into the year with all those done because we brought the key to them essentially over the summer and the beginning of the school year. It's not an overnight process. So, we would love more professional development time, and that's been expressed. I think the last meeting that was discussed to address any of those issues that are there for inconsistency. I'm not surprised going into a year where there's this level of change that people are like settling into it. It takes some time.
I guess just my own personal opinion. I realize there could be 7 board members with 7 different views on things. I guess I just want over time to see some improvement on some response. Again, I don't know, 10 to 15 students per grade level is a good number. I multiply that out and then you get 40 to 60 students that would pass. That's a lot of work. You did a great job in a short amount of time trying to get as many students as you could. That's pretty good. But I don't know, I just want to harm.
It'd be interesting. No, we're not. It'd be interesting to go to some of those same students and say, explain the grading system. And leave it as broad as that. Rather than very specific questions that would least get other grading scales and other grading systems. How do I combine as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in high school? How do I evaluate those things?
Would it be worth in the future if we revisit this, that we have more specific questions that potentially give a more open-ended answer? Because reading some of these, it says in the responses that some of the students were confused by the questions, and that, so for instance, when they ask if the grading system is preparing them for the future. Well, these are also kids that have yet to go to college, have yet to enter the workforce, so preparing them for the 4-point GPA scale that they would see in college versus entering the workforce. And they're graded on their level of proficiency at their job. I think this is, like I said, dealing with kids who haven't done this yet, so that asking them how they feel about how it's preparing them for the future, they may not know that yet. So I think if we revisit this in the future, I think we need to have maybe better worded questions, or
I guess I wonder if there's a way we can incorporate this into the strategic plan. I mean, I know achievement is part of the strategic plan. Incorporate questions related to understanding of the grading system or how we get to grades or whatever. That feels like something that would be a common. Somehow getting some questions answered about that in there, whether it's under the heading of perception, authenticity, X. There's all these different areas on the KPIs of key performance indicators that we could get some information based on feedback on grading system. I just think that's something that, I don't want to do something separate every year.
Right.
If we're gonna survey
Then
everyone,
add something.
maybe we try to.
I also, I agree with what you just said, Sean. I think that having two kids, not kids, but in college at the moment, I think yes, college is typically on a 100-point scale, but I would say there isn't always a rhyme and reason as to why. One of my kids had great assignments, fantastic, but didn't get one single grade back. She got a midterm grade. I guess I just identified her by her. And then she had a final grade. So I think students also need to be aware that the grading in college is very inconsistent, regardless of the fact that they're most likely on a 100-point scale. I'm not saying we don't address this and keep working on it, but to think that the college grading system is perfect, there's also the curve, and why did you get an 85 on all of your tests but you end up with a 93 in the class? Like, make that make sense, or whatever. I'm making up numbers truly. So I just think there is
We have no assessments, you just have a paper.
You just have a paper,
That's
or teachers who say, well, don't come to class except when you have to you can choose to come to class or not, just turn in 3 papers and you're good. Like, I think they don't know what they don't know either. But I do think the more we are consistent in our communicating about it and finding some questions to ask, and maybe IBIS can help us frame a question that's like, I want to hear from the students what they're saying. And I think we know that some assignments, if I'm remembering right, the formative, some of them can't get a 4, but they're less percentage-wise, so that factored in. I don't know if that's the case with this, but that could be, well, no, some don't give out a 4. Well, it might be because on that formative, that's worth
Something that's not.
like a 0.25% or whatever it is, you can only get a 3 on it. So that's an accurate statement. They couldn't get a 4 on that, but they could. I mean, I don't know the answer. I just think we have what's written here, and we need to use this data to think forward. That's all.
Is there a way to do like an open-ended question, or like let the students give comments, so maybe we can see where this isn't working or where the disconnect is? I'm sure comments might come in handy if somebody had an opportunity to give their opinion on what's not working.
I think it should be incorporated in our strategic plan.
Especially if we're gonna talk to students every year, like as in a couple of KPIs. And teachers, if it's part of the teacher aspect as well, because we have teacher surveys as KPIs too.
I see that falling into 2 areas. So under learning opportunities, potentially some survey questions that would fall under perception, authenticity, and access, and under learning environment and student engagement.
Yeah, can you ask, when you talk to them about this conversation?
Because it definitely affects learning, it affects the environment, it affects.
International math. Other questions? All right. Thank you. moving on. On the horizon. Our order is a little different than the typical meetings, but. Anything you want added? We should be discussing. All right, volunteer list.
Make a motion to accept the volunteer list. Section.
Second. Motion a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, next up we have the athletic trainer discussion. We have information on our packets as well. And Cayman is here. Answer questions. You want to present anything?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think most everything's in here. And again, the biggest thing that I tried to put in here is like, I understand that the budget's already been passed, so I don't know if there's ways to get money that doesn't involve cutting lines, but because of the value that I see in it, I'm more than willing to readjust lines within my own items to make it happen. Just recently, the place that we contract with, which is Granite State Physical Therapy, finally found us a trainer. She lives pretty local. She lives in Meredith, and she's like just started out with us because obviously we still had money in the budget for this year, so we got her rolling in the hopes that we could find this for next year. There's a lot of value in this position. Otherwise, I wouldn't have offered to cut my budget that way if I didn't see that. We also recently are about to be involved in a pilot with the Brain Injury Association in New Hampshire in the fall, which involves like 10 schools, but they put a lot of effort into like the return to play protocol around concussion management, but the other one that currently they're looking at a law going into effect, not this coming year, but the following year around like return to learn, because there's not been a lot of discussion on the return to learn concussion management, so she would be someone that we would have as a part of that team as well. More than happy to answer any questions.
Does full-time mean full-time?
Yes.
Like, what does it, like, is it
Yeah.
40 hours a week or?
So it's basically, it depends on like what we need, but it would basically cover all practices and games. What it would cover. And then in between seasons, depending on what we need, whether it's kids taking impact tests or like whatever is needed throughout, would be covered. So this year it would be charged based on per hour, so it would be, we pay for the amount of hours that we get, but yes, it would be a limit per se.
So what would be the cost?
So like, again, this is,
I know this is the outline
yeah,
of what
so
you,
basically like what I'm
Oh, right
proposing in the budget is the 34.5.
the 34.5.
Yep.
34.
And I know before, like, we got to having to cut it basically because it wasn't being filled. It was around 27, but this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. So it obviously definitely has gone up, and it's definitely continuing to go up. And again, I might not have felt as strong if I didn't think that the person that's currently in that position and doing it for us is not a solid person to fill that position. And again, the biggest thing that I see is, we ask a lot of our coaches, and there's so many different things on their plate. Like, this is one less thing that I can take off the plate of coaches, that they have the support of medical personnel, just like our teachers do in schools. Like, I think it's really valuable.
So how is a trainer available for all practices? So take, spring sports.
Yeah.
We have, obviously baseball, softball, track, all in, different locations. Can you?
Yeah, so
How does
each
that work?
coach obviously has the contact information for the trainer. So if there's games going on, that would be priority A. If the trainer is at the games, say there's multiple games going on, all right, I'm going to spend a couple innings here, I'm going to head over to the other game, I'm going to spend spend some time there and just try to be around as much. The coach called up like, hey, I need you here for this. Like, yep, right over there, you know, for the rest of the issues.
But would they, if it was all practices, would they be in the weight room type of thing to be for students who are injured to go in there?
Yeah,
Like,
so
how's that?
the way that we've done it in the past is like right after school is usually the downtime in between before practices start and stuff. So, you know, she'd be stationed out of there. That way any kids that are looking to come in to do any like rehab type of stuff are able to go see her there. She can get them started with programs and that type of stuff. She also is pretty big into like weightlifting and that type of stuff, so she really wants to work with teams to help them develop plans for off-season workouts and different stuff like that.
And this would be effective immediately?
For next year.
Oh, so start of the.
Yeah, so like we still have the money in there for this year, which is covering what's currently going on, but this was obviously.
She's definitely out there.
Yeah. You know, obviously we've gone, like sometimes coaches have had it, sometimes coaches haven't, but every time that we have it, coaches are definitely super thankful to have that support. And for my sake, you know, especially when it comes around concussions or any of that type of stuff, they're about the best personnel that you could have for those. And in my opinion, obviously primary care physicians are great, but that's not their specialty. They have so many different things, and you know, they just this would be a really valuable asset for us to have for our kids.
I've done plenty of kicking coverage, and it's always nerve-wracking if a kid goes down and is injured. I do not have the training that a trainer has to address an injury, whether it's one of our athletes or a visiting athlete.
So, just to make sure I understand, the section under budget impact, we talked about cutting from current budget, right? Next year's current budget, I assume. What are we losing if we cut, say, uniform supplies in half?
Yeah, so the uniform, I would just have to prioritize how to shift that and what teams got to take the priority for this year. Honestly, like we've done a really good job over the last little bit in terms of the uniform, but I don't feel like we've had to roll teams without any clerical uniform. So I feel like we're in a pretty good place. So that
But does that
has to
cycle
happen.
stretch out by doing this?
It could. It definitely could, but I think you're talking about a team or two. So I think that I could make it work over time, but again, for me, I just want this position so badly that I'm doing whatever it takes to make it happen. So do I want to cut all this stuff? No.
I get that. But like, new equipment, replacement equipment.
So we would still have like supply line is where like the year to year like baseballs and softballs and basketballs and all the stuff that like are typical things that need to be purchased year in and year out. Replacement equipment is the stuff that, you know, is a little bit bigger that you're looking to replace that. And it's hard to tell obviously if something comes up in that. To me it was the best place that I could possibly do it.
So sorry.
Do you have any ideas on how to make the position more sustainable in the future? Because like Sean said, this is like line items out of the budget, and I would assume that this wouldn't be something that would be possible going forward.
Yeah, so obviously come fall when budget talks happen for not this coming year, but the following year is when I have some different ideas how we can do it moving forward. So obviously, I know this is not the solution for moving forward, but given the fact that the budget's already been passed, like this is kind of what needs to happen in order to take it through next year.
So currently, if an incident happens, for whatever reason, this individual isn't present, it would just, a call would go out to EMS.
Yeah, like, or if it's something that, you know, if it's concussion related, like immediately, obviously off the field, and it's basically sending them to their primary care doctor until you get clearance from something like that. You can't do anything. Like, you can't participate if we suspect it. Or any type of injury that occurs, like we don't have anybody to be able to give guidance or clearance on that sort of stuff.
Michael, do we have an administrator recommendation?
I recommend it with the budget adjustments that came in May. So motion to move forward with an athletic trainer, cost of $34,500 next year.
So is this something that and when we went through last budget cycle, we chose not to fund fully? And was that strictly because the position was currently vacant, or I don't remember?
So like basically what's been happening is any time that, like, you know, you guys get the numbers and the board comes back with, hey, we're trying to trim out some of the areas, like that's usually the one that always ends up on the chopping block because we haven't been able to fill it all the time. So that's kind of why it's been, you know, at one point it was here, and then wow, we had no one for that entire year. So you see a line item that didn't get touched at all. Well, next year if we don't have that filled, we're going to cut that out. So it's been kind of back and forth.
It's been 2 years.
Because they haven't been able to send us
Yeah.
consistently.
It's been hard, and that's why, again, because of how difficult it's been, why I think it's so important to try to jump on this and talk in the fall about how we can sustain it.
And we need to act on that tonight, or is it recommended to act on it tonight?
Is this truly gonna be $34,500, or are they gonna get insurance? Health insurance or anything beyond that?
No, this is a
Doesn't help
contract.
your employees.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
contracted position.
Alright, I figured I'd ask the question.
No, it's a good
Yeah,
question.
it's through Granite State.
You know, sometimes you guys are like, this is the salary for this thing, you take it, retirement and all that stuff, that's why I asked.
Good question.
So later on, Debbie's gonna give us like year-end information. If we were to fast forward to next year at this time, or whenever you show us the budget, we're gonna see transfers? Well, what?
Typically, we don't do transfers, but I'm not sure in this case if we would want to make sure we do those transfers.
So we don't necessarily know how we're going to show. I wanna know how we're going to show it in the budget.
Right. Typically, like I said, typically we don't do transfers, but this may be a case where the board would want it shown.
Or you would just see that purchase service for the athletic trainer would be over the line by 19.5. So we still overspend that line.
You just have to remember to underspend all the others.
Which we will. Confident.
We're gonna take action, we need a motion in a second.
I motion to accept the proposal. I don't know what the motion would be. The proposal as outlined for an athletic trainer for next year.
Further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
One percent.
Okay. All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buildings and grounds report. It's here. Yes, we have.
Yeah, but I
in our
have,
packet.
any questions on anything, what we're doing next year? That's just outlining our projects for the summer.
So is the parking, VHS parking scheduled already?
Is what?
Is EHS park lot scheduled?
Yeah, it's scheduled for, as soon as school's out, they're gonna start with drainage. So, that's the first step.
Do you have any groups in the Belmont Middle School in the summer?
We have our summer programming.
That will be
Extended school year.
impacted by the asbestos removal.
That's happening before the summer program.
And the way that stuff is contained when they're removing it, it should never leave the space that they're in.
And Parks and Rec isn't in there anymore.
Parks and Rec.
They'll be in after that's done.
And that's contained to the cafeteria area.
Just a hallway outside the cafeteria, actually.
So that is happening in July?
That's happening in June,
Oh, this
June
one.
20th.
This one, not this one. 6th grade bathrooms.
Yeah, the bathroom's happening in July. That's everything that's happening over the summer. The asbestos removal's happening, is out of this year's budget. What's happening in June?
And we're good on staffing for all of these to happen?
Projects, yes.
Yeah, for like painting, like I know we do the common areas of the different schools. Is that a separate hire?
We,
Do we use existing?
we definitely use the paras, basically we use paras to do painting. And we use the kitchen help to do painting. That's where we get our staff from. And I haven't put that out yet as to who I'm gonna have, but, I know I have one kitchen person already, and we're doing pretty well in the painting. You know, so we've caught up a lot.
Questions for Steve? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is Brandon, Information Technology.
Yeah, I am pretty happy to say that as we approach the end of the year, the project list has more completed than not. One of the things I wanted to mention that my plan was to get the district firewall replaced over April vacation. And in order to get E-rate reimbursement for it, we had to wait for an April 1st cutoff date in order to submit the PO. So in waiting for that, we submitted it on April 1st at like 8 a.m. And I pushed really, really hard. But of course, the firewall showed up at Thursday at 3:30 on April break. So we weren't able to get that in, and that requires pretty significant downtime because it takes down the entire internet, phones, wireless, you name it. So at this point, it's looking like it's going to be more of a summer project. But we do have it. We're working on getting it configured, and it's sitting in the rack powered on right now. So if anything were to happen to the one we have a hot swap available to get fired up ASAP. Just one other note, after submitting the project list to Kim for the packet, I did get the quotes back for the NVR, the network video recorder replacement, and the access control manager appliance replacement. And along those same lines, we received notification of the stop, I'm going to see if I can say this right, Stop Violence or Stop School Violence. So it's SBPP, it's a grant from the DOJ that we can use towards KIM system and access control appliance. So we're going to try to go that route. Other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Question on the Chromebook replacement. Are we still getting ESSER funds for that? Or is that-
No. The Chromebook's been coming out of the general fund for a few years.
We did something with us recording.
Yeah.
So it's a mess.
Well, we had gotten some years ago, we got the first round. Okay.
So that's including all Chromebooks.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you. And business administrator.
The first thing in your packet is the general assurances. This is something that the board has to adopt and authorize the board chair and the superintendent to sign in order for us to get our federal allocations. I did provide a side-by-side comparison of what was different from last year's, information about what was different from last year's.
Board chair and who?
The superintendent, which is now called the senior education official. According to this document. So we just need to,
I'll make a motion to allow the superintendent, AKA senior
education official.
education official, and the board chair to accept,
Sign and file
Sign and
general
file.
assurances.
sign
On
the
behalf of
general
the
assurances. On behalf of the Shaker Regional School District. That was painful.
That was painful, was going through them.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Right.
The next thing.
Thank you and congratulations.
The next thing in your packet is the financial report. That is through last week. Whatever could be encumbered has been encumbered. There are still some outstanding. When you see my analysis, you're going to say, well, that's not what's on the reflected. Some things aren't encumbered because they're like monthly utility bills or other certain bills that it's part of the process. So, but that is the financial report through May 22nd. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just want to make sure I understand what you just said. But
Yep.
At the bottom, it says available 2.4 million.
Mm-hmm.
But some of that is going to be encumbered.
Exactly, yes, yep. So what I do in the process when I do the financial report is I look at, say, substitutes. What have we been using for substitute? What's the history? And project out what we're going to continue for the end of the year. Utilities, it's the same thing. What have we been using? Do some estimates and projections. So.
I struggle with the 1.5 million and some change.
We're not there yet.
We're not
That's the
there
next item. This is just the financial report.
It does all flow together.
It does.
Well, yeah, okay. Then
So I guess, let me start by just saying, are there any questions on the multiple pages, 11 pages? I mean, basically what I do when I look through this is say, where are the areas we underspent,
Right.
overspent? Are there any questions like that? I guess one way of looking at it. All right, let's move on to the year-end estimate.
All right, so the year-end estimate, I go through the entire budget. I look at what we've spent to date, I look at each line item, and I project what we're going to continue to spend. And I come up with an amount of what I believe we're going to underspend in the general fund. So as you can see, and that should have been the 24-25 funds remaining, not 25-26, we're not there yet. So based on what I'm projecting out, we're going to have about 1.9 million underspent. Of that, 1.52 is in salaries and benefits, based on openings, not being able to fill positions, turnover. Now some of that is netted out because we've had contracted services that we have to pay, particularly for custodial, we have to pay contracted services, so that's netted out of that. And we have some special education paraprofessionals, one-to-one behaviorals that we've had to contract out. So I've tried to net out, but the majority of it is salaries and benefits, and then special education, tuition, and other related services. We also have significant savings in.
So the remaining 400 is
It's about 300,000 in special ed tuition, and then it's
income, but
well, it's just other areas throughout. Yeah.
reimbursement. There we go. That was the word I was looking for.
So.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I would like a better handle, though I don't have to present it this year, on the 1.5 million in salaries and benefits. And I understand what you're saying, but I think I've twice had to explain that we're understaffed, now we're fully staffed.
Yeah.
And maybe others feel differently, but I just don't have a handle around why that's a lot of money.
It is. If you go back to the general fund report, if you go back to page 1 of the general fund report, you'll see right there in salaries and benefits, this is just a regular education line. It's $176,000 in salaries and $126,000 in benefits. So we have positions that have gone out on leave that we weren't able to get certified staff, so we've had to pay subs, which is lower. We've had other positions, if we couldn't get a substitute, we're paying a differential to a support staff member, so we're not paying the sub line out on that. We have had some openings that we haven't been able to fill, classroom teachers that we haven't been able to fill, or we filled late. There was a lot of changes in benefits that we had people, when they left, they may have been on a family plan. We didn't know they were leaving at budget development time, so I couldn't budget a lower plan. Or a lot of support staff left that were on 2-person and family plans. The ones coming in are on single and family. So it makes a huge difference. When you hire people at a lower salary, you're reducing some of those estimated and budgeted costs. Retirement goes down because their salary is down. The life and the long-term disability is paid out lower, and workers' comp is paid out lower. So it's a huge compounding factor when you can't hire people or you hire people at lower rates. So that's just one example. That's $300,000, and that's just in the 1100s. You see the same thing in special ed.
Yes, that's a bigger
In
number.
special ed, it's $1 million. But you're going to see there, $280,000 is overspent because we've had to have those one-to-one behaviorals. We had to contract for those services, but we have special education teacher positions open. We have not been able to fill. So that's a huge part of that. The special ed coordinator left partway during the year. That money is not being spent. So it all ends up adding up.
I guess I didn't realize how non-filled we were, for lack of a better way to say it. I mean, I don't know.
It's somewhat nature of the beast. With I'm assuming with any school. I mean, just for round numbers. I mean, that $1.5 million is what, little less than 5%.
Yeah.
Of the total total operating budget. So while 1.5 million, sounds huge, it's a fairly small percentage of the total operating budget.
And while I appreciate that, I think we were spending hours last budget.
We're trying to eliminate
over
that, yeah.
$80,000 or something. So I'm struggling because I can't I understand the
Right.
words that you are saying,
Yeah,
but
yeah. But unfortunately, the budget analysis for 1 year doesn't mean you necessarily can cut positions in the next year, or that it's directly going to correlate with.
And
what's
I'm not
going on.
actually suggesting that. I'm more thinking, I guess I had no idea how many positions we had open this year for regular. Like, I don't even remember, truthfully, a coordinator quitting in the middle of the year. And I'm sure we got that. I'm not saying we didn't.
And then another issue was it was a revolving door for a while. We'd get somebody in and they would leave, and then it was, a month and a half by the time you go through the hiring process, find someone, get them fingerprinted, background check comes back, you get them in, so you've had a gap. And again, you're not paying the benefits during that gap.
So, for many, many years, we've tried to not do budget transfers, right? Probably as long as you've been superintendent, we've gone away from that. If we were to do budget transfers, could we propose a lower budget? And then if we ended up being stuffed or whatever, we could move money into those fields. So I guess what I'm getting at is, yeah, we're fighting over $80,000 and then we have 1.5 sitting there. Like, why? How do we make that a little more?
So budget transfers aren't going to help in that case. When you're doing budget development, you really should be budgeting for the positions that you need.
Knowing that we're not going to fill
Well,
some.
we don't necessarily know that we're not going to fill them because things are turning around and now all of a sudden we are hiring people, we are attracting people.
We know every year we have $1.5 million of salary and benefits that aren't getting.
Which was only since COVID hit has this happened. It was not like that before. But I would caution against cutting things knowing that you could move them into salaries if you need to, because then what are you moving from? There's not a lot in supplies, books, pencils, that you can move into salaries when you know you have to hire somebody. And by the time that happens, you've already done the orders for that because they need the supplies to start school.
I don't know, I'm just struggling processing wise to stand up in front of people saying we need this amount of money, or we spend excruciating meetings, my perception of those meetings, not anyone else's, talking about under $100,000. And so I guess as we go into budget development, I'd like us to think about how we work the process. And I'm not saying we cut or whatever, but I just...
And that was part of the process when we were doing budget development, because when we were looking at the revenues, we did say, we're going to have a significant fund balance. We can turn back $800,000. So that was part of the estimated revenues that we presented to the voters, knowing we were having the savings in salaries and benefits. We did talk about that.
I do think we've made some, in my words, improvements in maybe what we budget for new hires. We make an expectation that it'll be a single.
Agreed.
So we tried some things. I'll say that. Just again, it does feel like a lot of money.
And the board also made some decisions this year about changes to the health insurance contribution for support staff. And I did send out the notice to the support staff, letting them know what the increase would be based on the board's action and the health insurance contribution. And I received several emails back thanking the board for those steps.
So I'm not surprised by those numbers. I mean, we do our best to not have it that high, but it's you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. I mean, Jeff, you presented kind of 2 meetings ago what's going to be needed for air handlers. I mean, there's some money to go towards it.
Yeah, when do we have that discussion?
Next meeting. So the first page kind of outlines where I got the information, how I came up with it. The second page is the formula that we follow, or that I follow, to calculate the final fund balance. So as you can see, you always start with your beginning fund balance plus any retained fund balance, reserves, amounts voted, reserves for encumbrances and prepaids. Then you add your revenues. subtract your expenditures, in this case the projected, and you come up with the anticipated fund balance. Now, of that $2.6 million that I'm anticipating, $205,000 was reserved by the voters. And you already had estimated you were going to return $800,772, and that was part of the estimated revenues that we talked about, which leaves $1.6 million. The maximum you can retain based on the calculation of the 5%, which was approved by the voters, is $1,040,043, which would leave the $602,046 additional fund balance. Now, you don't have to retain the $1,040,000. This is just preliminary.
So, just going back higher up in that page,
Yeah.
plus retained fund balance of 700. That was a number we.
You
as a
retained
board,
it last year, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have retained more, but you capped it at 700,000.
I guess what I'm getting at, something to consider in the future when we talk about budget is, do we need to retain that much? Would that impact what our,
So for the last two cycles, we brought it.
We've been
Yeah,
bringing
we've
it
been
down.
slowly bringing
Right,
Yeah,
right.
bringing it down. I know you presented, I liken it to, that shock absorber, so your rate doesn't go, up, down, up, down, up, down. So, at some point, we should stop, whittling down, so we can keep that shock absorber, so a little bit of stability in the tax rate.
So this is for information tonight. It's not something for you to do anything with. I know Buildings and Grounds is going to be having some discussions at the next meeting. And like Mark just mentioned, we've already talked about the HVAC systems. We have put a couple of grants in to try to get some money to help support Canterbury and Belmont Elementary School, but we still have a lot of other HVACs that need to be addressed. So. Any other questions?
thank you. Superintendent Report.
Gearing up for the end of the year. The last day is June 19th for staff and students. That's an early release day for students. High school graduation is Friday, June 13th. And we'll have our 8th grade promotion on the night of the June 18th. I believe PES 4th grade promotion is on the 17th. So it's a busy time. Summer's right around the corner. It's a busy time in schools with all different events that are happening. And also,
CES is.
CES is doing a during the day 4th grade promotion. Because I usually have a 5th grade promotion, but this year they do during the day 4th grade. So again, it's a busy time right now, by all means, gearing up for summer. That being said, I'm pleased to say that we are successful in getting staffing for our summer programming, which starts right as school gets out, particularly for the middle and the high school. They do their standards recovery and credit recovery, and then our extended school year starts in July and goes through the month. And we're staffed. We still need a couple staff in high school. Other than that, we're staffed, which has been a change because we were struggling over the past couple of years to get teachers to do the summer programming for us, but we're all squared away at this point. It's crazy to think that's all right around the corner. Also pleased to give an update to the board around the Lakes Region High School Consortium. We currently have 10 high schools that are participating. Those are school districts that got board approval for the superintendent to sign, just as you gave me approval to sign that. I have facilitated 2 meetings at this point with groups of principals and superintendents. Directors of school counseling have been part of that as well. We've been working on the logistics, and we already have principals that are talking because they can't offer a course because they might have lost a teacher. that are calling the other principals saying, do you have room to take that course? So it's already working out fairly well. And the way we're running it is similar to a student applying for a course at the Hewitt or usually it's through the Hewitt, which is their application. So let's say a student goes to the school counseling department, they have a hole in their schedule, or there's a specific course that they want to take, which will allow them to meet their post-secondary goals. If we don't offer it, or the school doesn't offer it, they call over to the receiving school, and we have a list we're starting a list of courses that are available at each school based on the number of seats available. So a school counselor can work with a student and say, well, we can't offer Spanish here at our school. However, Belmont High School has 6 seats available in their honors Spanish course. Phone call happens, an application is put in. We're using the same application form as a Hewitt, just tweaking it a little bit. That application goes over to the school council department, and it prompts them to automatically put into their student information system. So the teachers have access to their grades and so forth. So we're going to run it very similar to how we have students apply for courses at the regional CPD centers.
So if
Great group
seats,
of people.
if seats are available, would all classes be available?
It's based.
So is it in any class within the curriculum of studies, if there are seats available, would those classes be open for students to come in?
Any course that has available seats is part of this.
Yep.
This list. And each high school has their own spreadsheets, and once they do their master schedule, they fill that in with the courses that are available, the number of seats, and what time of day it's being offered.
But just to be clear, if the Stunning School has that course and has seats, they're not going to send students to us.
No.
They would.
Absolutely.
Just if they can't get into the class or.
If their high school does not offer the course, but another high school does, that's where the conversation happens.
Or if their classes are booked?
Potentially, but I don't see that as
Okay.
really an option that's going to be utilized all that much. But it opens up some flexibility
Yep,
for sure.
absolutely.
Students get the courses that they need. So please, it's got a great group of people working on this. Everyone's engaged, and as I said, conversations are already happening between schools.
So is there like a point in time that master schedule's developed, but I'm assuming our students would get access first, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then, how do you know that there's, what's the point in time where we would accept other students?
Once our students their course selections have been done.
There is an add drop period after the
Right.
semester
That was
starts.
part of our discussion. So we're honoring add drop at the receiving school, and it's interesting enough, the majority of the schools, the high schools that are on this list, have the same add drop period of time. It's about 5 days. Only one other school district has a 10-day window. Other districts are 5-day window. It all falls right there at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the second semester.
So there could be an opportunity, or not an opportunity, there could be a situation where a Shaker student wants to do a drop ad, and a sending district might have one or two students in that class, which would prevent a Shaker student from enrolling in that class because the seats were filled in June. Okay.
Not good. So our student, are we talking about one of our?
During
If
ad
they
drop,
wanted to do that within that ad drop period.
at the first
If
5
the
days.
seats are filled, the seats are filled regardless of the sending school. And the only way around that would be to call the sending school, and I don't know if that's necessarily fair either.
And we're really talking about a handful of kids that are taking advantage of this.
Yep.
But it's just nice to be able to have that flexibility to look at our students individually.
Have you heard any feedback from teachers?
I actually met with the high school teachers and I'm going to keep giving them updates along the way. So they provided me with a list of questions. This was your question, Jill. You asked last time the teachers going to be involved. I'm keeping our high school teachers updated. I met with them once the agreement was signed, and they had a series of questions. I met with them for a little over an hour, and I'll keep giving them updates.
I think it'll be important to communicate, which I'm sure we are, but with students in that potentially before the add drop period to like get your schedule solidified as soon as possible. Like, don't wait till the first day of school. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about, this isn't an excuse, but the students that just, I'll take whatever class, just schedule me.
Right.
And then they get into them and they're like,
Oh my God.
actually, I don't like this class, I want that class. And you have the, I mean, again, the numbers are really small so far. You could have that potential where you do something with your own.
And I think
class.
we have to monitor, like, you guys need to monitor that.
Yep, we will.
Like, what's the impact on Shaker students?
And that's how it's going to be in all the high schools because they're going to be
Same thing.
same thing. So. Best thing is we're a very collaborative group, and we have a page of frequently asked questions that they can add on to at any time. And we, as a group, our next meeting is June 9th. We work our way through those frequently asked questions, so anybody that has those questions, they can access it and get the answers. So it's going really well from a planning perspective.
Any other?
That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions for Michael? Internal policy, we have one policy.
Yeah, so this is policy GCAA. This is the highly qualified teachers policy, and we're proposing to remove this because, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, but it no longer applies.
Title no longer exists, right? School Board Association removed it as a policy and couldn't find it in any other districts around the region as well.
Stop for action.
I'll make a motion to, the recommendation to remove policy GCAA, highly qualified teachers.
Okay.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And we have Appendix B nominations.
I make a motion to accept the 25-26 Appendix B nominations.
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion with public? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And we do have one resignation. One resignation. Alright. Alright, so one resignation, we'll acknowledge that. Public communication correspondence. Alright, and we do have some non-public items.
Make a motion